Hey everyone, welcome to another race analysis video. This is a bit different because this race I'm actually not racing. You can see my team's just second off the line in the blue and pink kits. Got Ian, Alasdair, Adam and Aidan racing. I was going to race this race. Unfortunately, about a month before the start I came off my bike and managed to separate my shoulder. So instead I've come along on day 2 and stuck my cameras to my teammates' bikes. This is Adam's bike. And fortunately, Ian was able to step in at late notice and take over for me. So the race situation is, this is the Tour of the Fleurieu. The footage that we're watching is stage 3 on day 2. The race has gone pretty well for the team so far. On day 1 in the team time trial, they came second as a team, about 20 seconds back, I think, from first. But Aidan managed to win stage 2. With a couple of seconds gap on his breakaway, and then the breakaway of 5 had a fair gap back to the rest of the field. So there were really only 4 other people who were contending for the win in this race, given the big gap back to the pack, and so the team was all in behind Aidan for this race. So this race is an interesting course. This back section of the course has a whole bunch of up and down rollers. It's really punchy, and then as you turn northwards, the finish line's at the top left-hand corner on the map. It drags up about a 5 or 6 minute hill and gets really quite steep towards the end. So this course really isn't for me, thanks to that climb at the end. So I wasn't too upset not to be there. But yeah, with Aidan leading the GC and with him having a really good kick up that sort of climb, the team was all in behind him. So I had a chat with the boys at the start of the race. The strategy at this point was for Aidan to sit in unless anything particularly dangerous went. Alasdair, Ian and Adam were just going to marshal through the race, make sure no dangerous moves got off the front, keep the pace reasonably high, and try to lead out Aidan up that last climb on the second lap, if at all possible. So we're jumping into Alasdair's footage now. Ian's sitting a little bit closer to the front, and Aidan's just off on Alasdair's left shoulder with the bright red beard. Now, watching back some of this footage after the race, one of the things I noticed is that the team was really communicating well. Aidan and Alasdair are chatting about who's up the road, what's the strategy, and then Alasdair drops back to have a chat with Adam, who's sitting in the van. And I really enjoyed actually hanging around the team between the races and before the races, because it was really clear that there was a team strategy. Everyone was committed to it. Everyone was willing to work for it, and that always makes for a lot of fun racing. So jumping forward, this is the start of the climb on that first lap, and you can see it really starts to pinch up, 9-10% gradients going up there. And this is when the sprinters like me usually start to get shelled on this first lap. And that's fine. Part of the strategy for the team was that one of us would do most of the work keeping things together on the first lap and leave. I think it was going to be Alasdair this race, and then the other 2 were going to do most of the work on the second lap or as needed. But you can see from Adam's footage here, Alasdair's just up ahead in the pink socks and people are already starting to go backwards. And this is where it really starts to bite. I mean, it's only 2% at this point, but it's about to start rising. They're doing 30 k's an hour and Alasdair's sitting in the wheels at 300-400 watts. And what you can't really see from this camera angle is that just looking up ahead of you, you can see the road rising up to the left, and you can see, just as you clear this little scrubby bit, you can see what's coming at you. Now the problem for me when I've ridden this course is that this climb isn't even. You can't just get yourself set into a rhythm. It pitches up and gaps open, just like this one. Alasdair's jumping up around 500 watts now, trying to close this down. But having done a whole lot of work in the first lap, Alasdair's lights go out here, I think, and I think we see Adam come sprinting past. So people are starting to jump across. There goes Adam, and I think Alasdair makes the call at this point that he's going to pull out at the end of lap 1, because we've still got stage 4 to come after this. And stage 4 is it's another team time trial, but it's up a really steep hill. This is just jumping back a few seconds. You can see Alasdair closing that gap before he blows at 500 watts, and Adam chases across. But stage 4 is a team's time trial that starts on a relatively flat section and then kicks up around sort of 12, 14, 15%. So it's really useful if you're riding for one team member to have the 3 guys ahead of him to lead him out over the flat as hard as they can go, and then provide whatever draft they can sort of for the first half to 3/4 of the climb, and then let him burn up whatever he's got at the end. So anyway, Alasdair's job's done, and it's now up to Adam and Ian to support Aidan through the rest of this race. So we're a bit of the way around lap 2, and there's a group of 2 or 3 up the road, I think, at this point. And a couple of the teams are represented, and we're not. So Adam gets on the front to try to start closing that down. The problem with this course is because it's all up and down and around the corner, a couple of guys can get out of sight, and this grade tends to have a bit of an issue where once someone's out of sight, that's pretty much race over. It's too easy, especially when there's a couple of teams represented, for a break to get established, and then just that's it, everyone sits up. That's what happened in stage 2, and ended up with a 3-minute gap after a 2-hour race. So Adam's sitting on the front. He's doing a couple of minutes on the front to start with. And you can see after about 2 minutes he starts going from side to side trying to get the next people to pull through, and of course there's people just blocking. So he puts his head down and keeps on going for a bit. Eventually another team pulls through. Eventually. Sometime. Anytime. There we go. Unfortunately, the riders that do eventually get on the front just soft pedal. I mean, the pace is down at 30 k's an hour on the flat. So Adam gets back on the front again, and he just sits on the front for the better part of 10 minutes. I mean, I think at one point Ian comes through to try to pull the turn, but none of the other teams are contributing anything to this. And after that little bit of soft pedaling from the other teams, the guys up the road are out of sight. And they're so far up the road that this is now potentially a series-winning move. We've got maybe sort of 5-10 kilometres left in this race, and there's only one team pulling and only one team chasing this. So without this effort, this really was quite potentially race over and series over. So after that mammoth effort on the front, the guys up ahead still aren't in sight. But Adam must be cooked now, right? He's done about 10-15 minutes on the front. Trust me when I tell you that he had about 2 minutes gap, 2 minutes of a break sitting in the wheels. So he's cooked, right? There's nothing else he can do. He now spends 10 minutes on the front pulling this brake back. I don't know what planet he was on today. I don't know what go-go juice he had in his bottles, but he put his head down and he just dragged this field for another 10 minutes. When he finally does flick the elbow, the guys up ahead are just barely in sight. But it's really been 2v1 for the last 10 minutes, in fact for the last sort of half hour of this race. Unfortunately, when Michael Piacente from SA Fabricators attacks here, Adam's really got nothing left. Michael was one of the ones in the breakaway, along with Nick Delbridge, 249. And so that's an attack that has to be closed down. But fortunately, this time, Black Chrome's got some interest in chasing it down, because they've got their GC guy, sitting now in third wheel, so he's going to do some of the work to bring it back. So as Adam understandably drops off the back of the race here, the race situation is that there's 2 guys up the front. We now know that they are not the 2 guys who were in the breakaway yesterday, so they're not threats to the overall, especially since Adam's managed to keep their gap down to something manageable under that sort of magic 3-minute mark. Aidan hasn't had to stick his nose in the wind all day, and he's still got Ian to help him close any gaps that might open up in this last few kilometres of the race. So we're coming into these rollers, which can be really punishing on the legs if you've been working on the front too much. The gap to the 2 guys in front is about 35-40 seconds. They're in sight, but they're still quite a bit of work to get them. This group's been whittled down quite a bit, and we've got 2 fresh guys in the group, including our GC guy. So that's where the on-bike footage ends. This is now me filming at the finish line. And Alasdair and I have no idea what the race situation is. So we see 2 guys crossing the line from Black Chrome and SA Fabricators. We know that there's 2 guys from Black Chrome and SA Fabricators who are in the break. And so we're worried that Lampy's managed to get dropped. But then we see that this is Lampy coming across the gap. Had a chat with him afterwards. He said that the gap kept coming down, and then he and a couple of others jumped to try to get across it. Couldn't quite make it to get the win on the day, but they knew that all of this was... the race was behind them at this point, because they knew who was in the break and that they weren't a threat on the overall. So Lampy was the only one who got even close to closing that down. Zane Espy from Everything Bikes did a really good job, finished another 20 seconds back. But the only other person on the overall who was really featured in this was Denny Hall, who finished in this bunch here, nearly a minute down on Aiden. So at the end of stage 3, Aiden had probably about a minute and a half gap to second on the overall, and we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. So last but not least, we had the team time trial up Crow's Nest climb. This is a brutal climb that starts out pretty flat, but then just gets steeper and steeper as it goes. The team strategy was pretty simple. Adam, Alasdair, Ian, Aiden. Adam was going to go as hard as he could on the flats and try to keep things together. Alasdair would then do the same as it got a bit steeper, and Ian would go until he blew, and hopefully leaving Lampy to do a hero effort up to the top. However, you can see Alasdair sitting in second wheel at this section is already doing between 400 and 500 watts sitting in Adam's wheel. I said in the other video before that Adam was just on another level today, and the power that he was able to sustain was unbelievable, especially when you consider that he'd been on the front for a third of the race earlier this morning. I won't go into too much detail, safe to say that Alasdair was still having to sit at 420 odd watts, just trying to stay in Adam's wheel, and after having done his fair share of chasing on the first lap of the race this morning, he blew. Adam managed another couple of minutes and managed to drag them across the flatter section before he popped. And then as they hit the steeps gradients, he pulled off, leaving Ian and Aiden to race up to the top of the hill. Anyway, the rest is not on film. Aiden managed to get the fastest time up the climb by about 30 seconds, beating Zane Espy in second. But more importantly, he put almost a minute into Denny Hall and well over a minute into Nick Delbridge, who were sitting in 2 and 3 at that point. So Aiden took the win, both on stage 4 and also on the overall, and that wrapped up an awesome weekend of racing with Mood. Team came third in the overall, and I'm looking forward to racing next year. Bye for now.